the fun with modern technology. So today, I am I'm moving forward with our September theme, which is facing the fear. And I will throw up a couple of slides for you here. Poor choice of words, I know. And so anyway, that's our September theme. And you're going to get to hear from our three different ministers, from Reverend Sunshine, me, and Reverend Judy, our different takes on this theme this month. And the theme for this week is called Skepticism, Doubt, and Faith. And, you know, a healthy dose of questioning is a great tool for developing an understanding of what you believe and know. And this, the guide this week said, open at the top means you admit you don't know it all, and you question what you believe. And you ask what it means when someone feels their prayers have not been answered. So I think that's an interesting place to start, because this question comes up a lot about answered prayer and about questioning and about doubt and about skepticism. And so there were a couple of things that that I wanted you to take away from today. And so I'm going to leave with those to see how much you're able to stay with this theme as I move through at least my take on it. The first thing I want you to get is that within you is already the full faith of God. One does not need to look outside oneself or ask upon anything outside of them to cultivate and to bring about that, that faith that's already within you. And the other thing is that prayer is always answered in some way, shape, or form. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in the science of mind, we talk about answered prayer is that connection, that feeling one gets as one is praying. And that is the first answer. There might be many answers to a prayer, but the first answer, and probably the most important, is that quality of God that is being called forth within you as you pray. That feeling, and it can even be that desire for that feeling to come forth. The other part about answered prayer is that what is being changed when one prays is you and not the outer world. There might be a later outer world realization or demonstration of that prayer, but the first demonstration, the first realization is within you. And that could be your change in perception. The world may not change at all, but your perception of the world is changing. And it changes every time you pray, maybe a little, maybe a lot. But that's what's happening in answered prayer. So there might be a time delay between that picture, that outline you have for your prayer. But, you know, the way Michael Beckwith puts it is, it's, you know, the answer to most spiritual questions, the answer to any prayer is now or not now. And so if it's not now, it's eventual, but it's certainly going to be now. So in that respect, all prayer is answered. And in that respect, you already have that faith within you. And as you are moving through your life and your spiritual practice, your dedication, your rededication to those principles and practices that propel you, you know, that open your heart, that open your mind, that soothe and grow your soul, that your prayer is always answered with and as at that level right away. So with that in mind, how much resistance do you have to that, if any? Everyone here might be, yeah, that's old stuff. I already got all that. What else you got for me, Rev Kev? But for some of you, there might be some, you know, I don't know about that. That sounds a little out there. So is everybody with me up to now, or do you have some question or some clarification required? Anything? No? All right. Well, that means I can move along. Thank you, Nicole, for the thumbs up. Anyway,
Reverend Kevin, before you move forward,
yes.
I think this is beautiful. The basic reminder that the answer to the prayer begins with the feeling tone of your receptivity and understanding. I think that's a sermon in and of itself. You articulated it beautifully, and rock on. I've got goosebumps. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Reverend Kevin,
Yes, Bertha.
what I've learned is answered prayer isn't necessarily what I wanted, but it was the answer to the prayer. So it's just, I had this vision of how it was going to be fixed. And I didn't like the answer, without a doubt, but I didn't like the answer for me. I liked the answer for my son, because I prayed for wholeness and peace. And he did get that. It took about a year for me to recognize that my prayers for my son were answered. He was no longer suffering.
Wow, that's very powerful. Thank you, Bertha.
I have a quick comment too, because, now that everyone else is chiming in, in 12-step program, they say, be careful what you pray for, because you just might get it. And what like when people pray for patience and then they go to the supermarket and there's a long line, now they got to practice the patience that they just asked for or something like that. But I'm also kind of in tune with the resistance to even praying in the first place. And then when I pray, and I don't get it the way I want to, how it automatically then triggers and feeds into prayer doesn't work, or why pray, or why be vulnerable to this invisible power and presence. Is it really, I get to check whether I'm thinking that there's a power and presence outside of me that's going to grant me something. So it just, when we're talking about it in this kind of simple way, it brings up a lot of that stuff that I hear people come to me about. So I'm wondering if, I'm sure you're going to touch on a little bit of that, if not a lot of it.
Okay, I'll chime in too.
Right.
What it reminds me of is the good old Rolling Stones. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you'll get what you need.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Wow, this is really rich stuff, and thanks everybody for, there's a certain courage and vulnerability to even share in this format that I have to acknowledge and appreciate, and it enriches this experience for everyone, and know that everyone here can join in and contribute or be fed in any way you like. So that's one of the intentions, and therefore I think one of the benefits or one of the features of this kind of gathering is that we're all in this together, and each one sharing contributes to this, sum that's great, the total being greater than the sum of the parts, something along those lines. And I think there's a very simple word that I've shared with you before from the ancient Aramaic that has found its way into modern Hebrew, and the word is tuv, T-U-V. And that word just means to turn. And we would put it in context as to turn to. Now, what it symbolizes in the ancient Hebrew tradition was to turn to something, and there are many references even in the English translation of the Bible that talk about turning, right? Maybe starting with turn the other cheek, or to turn through the seasons of, the seasons which are the seasons of our lives. But it often is referenced as to turn away. But in the truest sense of the word, when you're turning away from something, you are turning towards something else, right? And therefore, any spiritual practice, but particularly a spiritual practice where you are doing the contributing, not the receiving, that you are turning toward something and away from something else. And so I always like to think of prayer in the most basic form, is that I am turning to spirit, that I am turning toward God, that I am turning toward the light, that I'm turning toward compassion, that I'm turning towards intelligence, that I'm turning toward creativity. And just in that simple mentality of turning, that something is shifting, something is turning within me. And therefore, something is shifting, something is growing, something's expanding, something is releasing. All of those things just come from that turn. So when Reverend Sunshine refers to folks that are in the midst of a journey of, we'll say, recovery, well, in our sense, they're healing, but they're healing some outer world, challenges that are, more easily identified. But like everyone on this spiritual journey, including me, including everyone here, there's a certain healing going on. And of course, that healing is revealing more of the God, more of the good that is already within you. And in so doing, you are activating that faith that is already within you. So it could be that the prayer of, dear God, please show me something different than what I am experiencing right now. Even that is a turn, because you have turned toward God. However that the God of your understanding appears to you in that moment, that is a turn. That is a turn toward God. That is a form of prayer in its most simple form. And that prayer is answered because you've already made the shift. You've already made that turn. And therefore, you are open to something else. You are opening to something else, something different than what you have right now. You hear this all. I'm more sensitive to it probably because of the number of laps around the sun that I've completed. But you hear this phrase, these are the times that try one's soul. Anybody heard that phrase before? These are the times that try one's soul. Like there is something different about what's going on right now in someone's life or in the world of their affairs or the world in general. And of course, I never thought much about that. I heard it a million times, but I never thought about it much until I was in my 30s. And then I started to hear it again and again. And I was like, well, how can this be any different than the one that tried one's soul 10 minutes ago or 10 years ago? Right? And the truth is, anyone on this spiritual journey, anyone on this journey of awakening, at least from my point of view, that really every moment is a kind of a pivotal moment for you, for me. And that means that, you're taking that moment to reflect. You're taking that moment to recognize that of all the other experiences, of all the other expressions, of all the other circulations, of all the other connections in your life, that somehow this moment has become a standout, has become important to you or to me. Now, whether or not the history of your life or the history of the world kind of confirms whether that was a relevant or an accurate observation, there is in that moment a turn, there is a recognition that, and there's a courageousness to that recognition that my past, this moment, and the future, I have the courage to look at it and say that my consciousness is shifting, that something is evolving, that something is emerging, or in some cases, something is erupting. Because sometimes that call to change is something that is so, so agitating and maybe anxious and stirring that it gets your attention, you just can't avoid it. And in so getting your attention, you're recognizing something's got to give, something's got to change, something's got to shift. So when we talk about facing the fear, right, part of that fear that one faces is about that change, is about that shift, is about something's different and I'm recognizing something's different right now, that it's got my attention. And the ordinary something difference, you know, those differences that just sort of blend into the next change and the next change and the next change from the previous change from the previous change. There's something different and more significant in my conscious awareness, so much so that I'm paying attention to it. And I'm paying attention to it so that it is deepening my awareness, and therefore my practice of, therefore my circulation of the good of God that's within me. And it's all part of that recognition that, you know, something is dissolving, something is being released, something is shifting, in order that the truth of your expression, the truth of your being, shines forth more brightly. That in that moment, your love is bigger, your compassion is deeper, your life is more light-filled, even if just by a little. And that takes a certain amount of courage to do that, and to do that again and again and again, and to do that consistently. Now, we've talked, you know, we've tweezed out fear, and we've used all the different pithy phrases and acronyms, so we don't have to trot back through that. But I do want to just remind folks that, you know, fear is a natural part of this human phase of your soul's journey. Therefore, there is a rightful purpose to fear. Otherwise, you would run out into traffic, right? But it's when fear doesn't, it expands beyond its rightful role, that it comes to that level of discussion that would affect your spiritual growth, to affect your shift in consciousness, to affect really that good that is, you know, shining forth so brightly from within, that good that reflects back to you so brightly from the world around you. When fear elevates to that level where it becomes a hindrance to that, that mode of growth or expression or experience, that's when you have some dominion over that fear. That's where you have choice around that fear. And therefore, you can take the steps to recognize that fear, to recognize that fear is sort of disproportionate. It is too big for my own good. And therefore, I can move through that fear. I can say, thank you for the information. Thank you for that emotional experience. Thank you for that transformative shift. And now I move through that fear onto something better, onto something greater, onto something brighter. And when confronted with that kind of fear, you become consciously aware of it. You process that fear, you move through that fear. On the other side of that fear, and sometimes, as Reverend Sunshine already mentioned, that you recognize that there's some other faculty working, and we would call that faculty faith. And as I mentioned, that faith is already within you in full. And therefore, your life experiences, especially as you are awakening on this spiritual journey, those moments of faith carrying the day, carrying your thoughts, carrying your practice, carrying your actions, that is often what emerges on the other side of those fear, those disproportionate fear experiences. So I like to think of faith as this faculty of a calm confidence, and it comes more easily and more frequently, at least in my experience, as I confront those disproportionate fears with metaphysical truth, with spiritual truth, with spiritual practices that apply these principles that are so easy and so profound in the science of mind teaching. So the last little point I want to make before I open this up to questions and comments. You know, the science part of the science of mind I've mentioned many times, but it's always, for me, worth mentioning again. And, you know, science in general is both a body of evidence, but it's also a method and a practice. And I think the method and the practice part, you know, that's where spiritual practices that we talk about in this teaching come into play. Meaning there is a method to, at least this is what Ernest Holmes developed for us, simplified for us based on a parallel to a scientific method, that there is a premise or hypothesis, and then we go about experiments to prove or disprove that hypothesis. And of course, the general hypothesis is that you and I are spiritual beings. We are derivatives, emanations of the Most High God. And therefore, within us is the capacity to express, to experience, to circulate, to connect with that spiritual presence, that God of our understanding, in magnificent and fantastic ways. So there's our hypothesis. Now, how do I go about proving that hypothesis? Well, I can pray, I can meditate, I can study, I can journal, I can vision, I can see my spiritual counselor, I can tithe, meaning I can give in a demonstrable way. I can also give myself over to sacred service. I can join into a beloved community with love-minded individuals. And so those are the methods. That's my laboratory, right? And therefore I am proving to myself through those practices the principles of cause and effect, those principles of circulation, those principles of equivalency, those principles of attraction. So that's the science part of the science of mind. So what I'm asking is engage in those spiritual practices to prove your own hypothesis that you are a full and complete expression, experience, circulation, connection of living spirit. You are that portal, that channel through which, as Reverend Sunshine says, you express God like no other. You are the unique and unrepeatable way, to quote Reverend Sunshine, that God expresses and experiences itself as you in this plane. And so as you do that, as you perform that experiment a little bit every day, a little bit every week, a little bit every month, not only are you proving that experiment to yourself, the God of your understanding grows because you are experiencing and expressing more of what is true about you. But you're also expanding your faith. And therefore, those moments of disproportionate fear are less and less common to you. And when they do arise, you have the tools, you have the mechanisms to overcome, to move through that particular fear and live the life of that full faith within you more completely. So are there any comments or questions up to this point? I got a heart from Reverend Sunshine. Thank you so much.
Can't do it. I am?
Yeah.
Oh.
Hi, Sunny.
Oh, good morning, Reverend Kevin. This talk is just, it's really flowing with clarity. It really, I'm seeing the work as you speak. You know, I see the work as you speak. It's just like unfolding in my mind's eye as you give the talk. So it's really beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else have anything they want to share? I'm going to share a quote with you while folks are thinking, because I like this quote a lot. This came from the outlines from CSL. It says, when prayer removes distrust and doubt and enters the field of mental certainty, it becomes faith. This from Ernest Holmes. So when prayer removes distrust and doubt and enters the field of mental certainty, it becomes faith.
Wow, this is great. Bertha, go ahead. I see you raised your hand.
Okay. I wish I would have had these words from you the last couple of days, and these are the words: please show me something different from that I am experiencing right now. That would have helped. I got a little bit lost, and day one of spiritual practice didn't change it, but I didn't give up. So day two of spiritual practice, then I woke up with a peaceful heart, and the world was right again. And that took a lot of faith, because it doesn't take that long. If I just go in the silence, do my spiritual practice, it always shifts. And I was really getting lost in not being, and I just, when you said that, I'm like, that's what I needed. That is the piece that was missing, that I just wanted, I didn't realize I just wanted to experience something differently. And thank you, because now I recognize that every time I did yoga, every time I did an affirmation, every time I read, every time I meditated, I was turning away from what was hurting and healing, and I didn't even know that.
Mm. Fantastic. Thank you, Bertha. Nicole, unmute yourself. I see your hand raised.
I just want to thank you for, you always just make things so clear. Sometimes spirit, like the spiritual path it can seem abstract, like these principles and these concepts, you hear spiritual leaders talk, and it just sounds really abstract, and you're like, yeah, that sounds beautiful, but how do I get there? How do I practically get there? What do I do? And you have this amazing knack of just really, just like I have said before, just breaking it down to brass tacks, just making it very clear and understandable for anyone, and just taking it out of that abstract kind of cloud and making it tangible. And I really, it's extremely helpful.
Thank you, Nicole. You kind of cut out there at the end, but I think we got the essence of your comment. Thank you very much. Does anyone else want to share anything before I close this all in a little prayer? So I think let's just turn our attention inward right here and right now, and call to mind that presence and power that is living spirit, it is loving spirit, it is compassionate spirit, it is creative spirit, it is healing spirit, and it is everywhere within. It surrounds and indwells all that is. And knowing that is so about me, I know it's true for you too, that surrounding you, indwelling you, is this same intelligence, creativity, this capacity to heal, this capacity of deep compassion, this capacity of connection and circulation, of something that is greater than can possibly be conceived, that exceeds all understanding. So I speak my word knowing that our mentality is always a portal through which you and I can confront those agencies of change that are called to shift consciousness, to open heart, to open mind, to deeper compassion. No matter what that doubt or skepticism might arise, no matter what that might be, that this is the direction, the turn toward the light. This is the turn toward God. This is the turn toward something better. This is a turn to a method, a practice, a principle that heals and grows my consciousness, that heals and grows your consciousness. And together we heal and grow our collective consciousness. And in that respect, that moment is a pivotal moment, not for the challenges that it brings up, but for the healing and the opening, the growth in consciousness, the deeper love, the more divine connection that pivotal moment awakens our consciousnesses too. So blessing the world as I am blessed, circulating God's good in ever greater ways, I give thanks for this answered prayer, for this communion, this connection. And I release it all into the law of mind and action, knowing as it is spoken, it is so. The right where you are right now, that shift is taking place. Tuv, that turn, is happening for you right now. And together we say, and so it is.